but when we found out that Meg had never had a compost heap. Yeah, but there are not that many people who have never had a compost heap. Have heard about it, maybe know a bit about it, but never actually tackled the event of having a compost heap. So today is really about the ins and outs of composting and actually how easy it really is, because there are so many ways you can do it. It's not like it has to be done in a certain way. So the compost we're going to build later on today is going to be a biodynamic compost heap. It's just one of the ways of doing it. The reason for that is that we like to try and, when we look out there, we just see the physical with our eyes, but in fact there's more than just physical going on. And so we need to raise our consciousness and our awareness of what's going on really behind the scene, as it were. We need to start looking at how we start creating that. And one of the ways is actually how we make the compost. And so the ways we make the compost is actually very specific to biodynamics. But likewise, you can make other ways of making compost, three-base system, and we'll discuss all of the ones, bakashis or whatever. We'll be going through all of them, so you're not sidelined to doing just this one way. But that's the compost heap we'll make today, later on. So, what do you actually know about composting? The questions are going to be probably fairly directed at you, but I will direct them at everybody else.
Alright, I know that you have to layer green and brown.
Okay, let's take the have to out of there.
Okay.
That's a way of doing it, yeah. Because some people call it like lasagna composting.
Yeah.
The reason for doing that is because it helps you to gauge the quantities of the different materials. And as we go through it, you'll see that you'll get the understanding as to the relevance of that, why it's important to understand the balancing of the green and the brown. So anyone else?
To me, it's the creating of an abundance of life, of soil microorganisms and of life to then provide that out in our systems.
Yeah. So you're creating inoculums.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where there are some people who use compost purely for that. They purely use it not as a fertilizer, not as a soil conditioner as such, but they're using it purely to inoculate with microorganisms. And that might be highly bacterial or right the way across to highly fungal, depending on what they want to use that compost for. Is compost? Well, as it stated on the first slide, it's the promise of life after death. To me, that really is what it's about. It's about recycling anything that was once living, recycling it so it can be utilised again by life to create more life. Which means that anything that was living can be composted. There are certain things that you use small amounts of, maybe like to do with the alliums, which is your onions, your garlic, or your citrus, and you can still compost them, but you use them in smaller quantities because they are pretty powerful. And so you want to spread that out as much as you can through your compost and not have it concentrated. I had an experience, a friend of mine was really excited, he was getting into composting, and he found an outlet for what he thought was great because it was organic matter that was being chucked to the dump, and it was a juice bar, and it was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of orange skins. And he had a big pile of them in his thing. He said, look at this compost heap. You could smell it a mile away. It was really, really acidic. So that was over the top too much. But, I said, no, spread out. You need to spread that out. You need to mix it with a lot more brown material especially, and buff it up. But still you can use it. And that's what he managed to do. He turned it around. He said, well, that's a lot of work. And I said, well,
You made it to what your desired outcome is.
Yeah. So, garden vegetable waste, lawn cuttings, composting toilets, when you start thinking about it, you think, oh my God, yeah. The thing I've discovered is those people get really excited about making compost. When you put your feelers out there, you'd be amazed at the amount of stuff people are throwing away. You go, oh, I can compost that. It's another raw product for my compost. The best compost is made from a massive amount of diversity, unless you're specialising. And if you're specialising, you just want a certain spectrum of microorganisms, then you're going to be using only certain things. But we're doing an all-rounder. So we can use it on the vegetables, we can use it on the lawn, we can use it on our trees, our fruit trees. We're trying to find something that fits the middle. Then you can, once you've got the hang of that, you can then specialise. Tip waste, transfer station refuse, again, I think we're going to be using some of that today. Different areas, quality of it can vary. Get to know your local dump, or transfer station I should say. What's the quality of it? You know, sometimes they're mixed with a lot of plastics and glass and steel. I've seen that before. Other times you can see them when they're really clean actually, and that will depend on the people in that area too. So you can get really good quality. So that's another resource that's not to be walked past. Worm farming is another one that, you know, especially for people who do it in you know, apartment blocks or in town where you don't have a lot of room. There's a young woman who does, I can't remember her, she's in America where she's really become conscious of waste, and all her waste for 4 years put it into a mason jar, and all her vegetable waste matter and everything, she goes to the farmer's market in town, she's in the city, Brooklyn I think. She takes all her compost material and she puts it in the freezer, and once a week when she goes to get her vegetables, she takes that with us, and they have a composting unit at the market. So another way it can be all recycled. Bokashi is another one that can be with that. Animal waste, bedding, you know, when you start looking around, it's just everything can be incorporated in the compost heap. Not just thrown out. If you know someone who's throwing something out, then maybe that's something for you, where you can. A good friend of mine, John Priestley, he realised that at the meat works they had lots of cardboard boxes that were covered in blood. And they said, oh, they're contaminated, we can't use them. He said, well, I can. You know, that's brown and green. The blood is nitrogen, which is green. The brown is the cardboard. And so he had this perfect mix already. He said, this will compost itself. But he added it into his compost heap. So they brought it to him, because he was saving them money, not having to take it to the dump. Sheet composting. Yeah, so look, there's many ways. And as we'll go into ways that we can also do it on a small scale. If you live you've got a small garden, an urban block, or how you can do it in the cities, and how you can do it large scale on the farm. We'll have a look at all of them. So the principles of composting. Microorganisms, micro and macroorganisms are the foundation of most life on this planet. Without them, nothing would exist. We are totally dependent on microorganisms and macroorganisms. Without them, we don't have the breakdown. We don't have the nutrient cycling. So when I say nutrient cycling, I mean when we take, say for instance, if we look outside and you can see the leaves on the ground and branches have fallen down, this is nutrition. You know, there's rocks, that's nutrition. But in their form as is, it's not really available nutrition. And so we need to have those microorganisms to make all that material available to the plant, which then becomes available to an animal or directly available to us. You know, we can't go out and eat a branch of the tree and say, great, it needs a bit more garlic. We can't actually digest that. But microorganisms can, and that's why we're dependent. Not only the microorganisms that are covering our skin, that are on every part of us. In fact, we're more microorganisms than human. We actually need to have those microorganisms in order to be able to do our digestion, in order to be able to maintain homeostasis, to maintain the acid-alkaline balance within us. These are all parts of it. So when we talk about microbes, when it comes to composting, they are the foundation of it. Without them, this breakdown process just doesn't happen. And that's what you see when you go into places where there are low in moisture, available moisture, the microorganisms slow right down. So the breakdown process takes a lot longer. In fact, if you go out to dry, arid areas, the composters are termites. They have the ability to recycle maybe your house. which is not desirable, but as they see it, it says, no, this needs to be recycled because it's not a living thing. And it's not actually performing a function in nature as part of the whole. So it will be recycled. Food for the food, again, this is making sure that we have food for the microbes so they can do the job. They're the workers. So if you build a house, you need building blocks. You need the timber, you need bricks. And then you need the workers to come in to put it together. But then you've got to feed the workers to make sure they've got the energy to do the job. So that's the food for the food. Because ultimately those microbes become the food. I'm not saying your workers then suddenly become part of your house or something that you then consume. But you get the idea that we need to make sure not only are we building a compost heap that's going to feed our garden or on the farm, but we need to feed the microbes that are going to do the job at the same time.
The cattle underground.
The cattle underground, that's the one. Aerobic and anaerobic, there are different ways of doing composting. You can do it through an aerobic, which is what we're going to be looking at mostly today, where we're using oxygen as the part of the respiration. If you go into anaerobic, they might be using different substrates like alcohol or nitrogen as their food sources, or their party food as it were. There's nothing wrong with anaerobic. Again, my experience being with anaerobic is you really have to be on the ball because it can flip into a negative anaerobic. In other words, it won't be actually beneficial if you haven't maintained the right balance within that system. Aerobic is a much more forgiving system. Moisture, absolutely critical. So I said you've got here, you're in the rainforest here, you have abundance of moisture. This is why you have this rapid breakdown happening all the time. Moisture is a real key factor in microbes being able to do the job. Where we are, we're dry sclerophyll. We can leave a log on the ground and it will be there in 10 years' time. It may be here in 50 years' time because it's much drier climate. If we cover it over and put a blanket over it, whether that be soil or mulch, and maintain the moisture, then we get a good breakdown as well. But here, your breakdown just happens because of the moisture. And temperatures also, as you were saying, when it gets to 20 degrees, you're not very happy. So for us, you know, I noticed today, I could feel it walking through the orchard. Everything stopped. Everything's gone into, what happened? Someone just turned the heater off. So we had 15 degrees there this morning, and yeah, you can feel it. And this is where the winter things will start to kick in. Things that can grow in those sort of climates. And the summer things tend to take a back seat. So there's benefits of wherever you are, how you can utilise those. Composting here is fast. When you're in the humid tropics, it's a rapid turnover. That's a benefit that you can get that, but it's also a double-edged sword in that you have to be constantly onto it the whole time, especially making sure you've got enough organic matter there to feed the microbes, because if you don't feed them, they'll find food from somewhere else. And that might be hoeing into, you know, your forest that you're trying to build. The forest has no attachment. It will succumb to what it needs to be. There is no competition. So wherever we are, we have to be proactive, not reactive to what may happen if we aren't proactive. Particle size and the shape of the heap will become more apparent as we go through this. The smaller something is, the faster it breaks down, which might not be beneficial in some areas, and other areas very beneficial. So again, me had a valuable experience when we did the first one, and producing parts of the compost heap that were rather big, especially things that are fibrous-y, like it was guinea grass that was being used, and I said, this will be interesting. The thing is, when you're doing a compost heap, and more often than not, my experience has been, even though we're going to do what we call a static pile, which means it doesn't require turning, or a lot of turning, generally my experience has been, even a static pile might need turning once or twice in the initial stages, because you might get heat build up in one layer and not another layer, and you might need to start to mix the layers up. And Neil found out. How was it, Neil?
It was hell.
It was hell.
It was trying to pull long strands out of a huge pile, and it's just, yeah.
And they all map together. If you've ever had the experience of doing felting, have you ever done felting?
No, but I know the process.
You know. So okay, so that's process is getting fibres to mesh together.
So you're saying that guinea grass is no good for the pile?
No, guinea grass is good, providing it's not in really long strands. So, what's the lesson from it then, Neil?
We cut our guinea grass really long, and when you went to turn the pile, you couldn't, when you went to pick up a little bit, you couldn't pick up a little bit because it had thatched with everything else, and so you're picking up, you know, a good metre of mix. It was just heavy and hard and hadn't broken down.
Can
Um,
If
you
we
turn
cut
it
it
with
up,
a machine, like with a tractor or something? Or you have
So yeah, you break it up into smaller. That's
Yeah.
all. Whether it be with a machete, you know, chop it up with a machete or a mulcher or whatever, or a slash. Even a slash, you put it through. You know, I know people go, "Oh, we got is a mower." I said, "Yeah, you can put the mower over it a few times." It might seem a lot of hard work to start with, but it's nothing compared to when
hell of
you
a
go.
lot more work later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the preparation of your materials is how easy it is to make a compost heap. And again, it's to do your particle size. Not only to make it, but then when you have to go in and actually do turning or any of that, you'll find. So in a commercial composting, everything is put through a mulcher or a chipper. So the particle size is small, so turning machines and everything don't get snarled up with fibre. We can get away with it more when you're doing a small compost heap because we can chop it up to make it a bit smaller, and we're only doing it on a small scale. We're not doing 50 metres, windrows, and there's 300 of them. So, but again, I don't want you to be put off by the fact that, oh my God, I can't use this kind of... No, we just have to look at how we manage it. That's all it is. I won't go into this in too much detail because it becomes quite confusing and it's quite complicated. But it's just to gain an understanding that the actual process of what takes place is both done chemically and physically. So we rely on these microbes. We start with the microbes. We're relying on them to actually start the process off. But it actually starts with us. That's the preparing everything to make it as easy a job as possible for those microbes to do the work. You put a tree in there, yeah, they can break it down, but it might take, in this environment, depending on the tree, but it might take 3 or 4 years, it might take 6 months, depending on the amount of microbes that come in. Some of the softer woods break down very fast. But that's not what we're looking for. We're trying to create something within 3 months so that you can then utilise that and start to spread the microbes. And it may be the fertility as well, if you're using it as a fertiliser, to help start kicking the mineral cycling as well. So these guys are really important. That's why we need to make it as easy as possible. They're really small. The microbes are really small. And so the smaller we make the particle, not too small. If we go too small, we can run into the problem that they actually go too fast and they kind of burn themselves out. We want them to be able to have enough to get them going, but not to the point where they go like a rage party where they completely go out of control. You've got these guys who start off and then they take it to different temperatures. And ideally we're doing a hot composting process. And the reason being is that for most people, when they first start out, are having to bring in material from somewhere else. So for instance, you're bringing in, say, the dump waste, dump mulch. You don't know the integrity of that product. You don't know whether it's been treated with chemicals, whether there's pathogens in there, whether there's weed seed, whether there could be antibiotics or heavy metals or whatever. We have no knowing of what comes in. And this is a very common thing because most people do not have, to start with, the actual the amount of material that they need in order to get the ball rolling. So we kind of like, it's easier to bring it in from somewhere else. That's okay. In an organic system, they say anything that's brought onto the farm needs to go through a hot composting process. So the opposite of hot is cold composting. So you're looking at things like worm farms. Worm farms are cold composting. Now you can do sheet composting, is also a form of composting. When you do it on a large scale, you're using green manure crops and whatever, and you're turning those in, or you use them as a mulch blanket, those will break down. Because of their size and the thickness, they actually never get to the point where they really heat up. And we'll get to see the importance of the shape of the heap will be really to benefit these guys and what they're going to do. And then ending up with the thermophilic, the guys will take it right up to, you know, they will take it even harder than that. There are thermophilic bacteria that they find in those vents in the ocean where they're at 200 degrees plus. So, and then they find the cyclophilic ones that they found under the Arctic. So these aren't just the temperature ranges that these guys operate at. These are the ones we're looking at in this composting process, so we can utilise what they do. Hot composting is really good because it cooks it. So anything that's coming like pathogens, weed seeds, or antibiotics, anything like that may have come in. And when I say antibiotics, you might be using chook manure. You use chook manure here. From a commercial chook grower, you know exactly what his feed contained, where it came from, what chemicals, what fertilizer we used in his feed, what does he use in his houses, does he use antibiotics in his water to prevent coccidiosis, So when it comes in, there's a list of things it could be, we don't know. So we presume that they've got some issue with them, putting them through, and taking them up to me, if you hit 70 degrees, they say 71 here, 70 degrees is that's when you've got to be like, okay, we're cooking really good now, but I don't want to go any hotter, because it can actually catch fire. And we don't want to do that. And you might not see the flames and the smoke coming out of it, and you see barns that get prepared, that gets baled too green, too wet, burn the barn down, physically burn it to the ground. We might not see that in your compost heap. We see it in the winter with us, when we turn it, we disappear in a cloud of steam, and we know, wow, it's cooking. If you open it up and you can actually see ash. Now the ash is grey coloured, not white. See white, that's Mycelium fungi. The grey can be ash, and it will be dry. Because when it heats up, it will give off moisture, that's respiration. When we get hot, we give off moisture, and microbes do the same. So when you open it up and it's dry, and you see it's grey, and you go, oh, it got too hot. If it gets too hot, the problem with that is you're losing carbon, you're losing nitrogen as ammonia, or carbon as carbon dioxide. You can get other things like methane and stuff coming off them as well.
Is it retrievable if it gets that high?
You won't lose everything, but you've already lost something. And where does it go? Carbon dioxide and all forms of nitrogen love to live up in the air. 78% of the atmosphere is nitrogen. So we want to keep it in a compost heap, and one of the things we do in biodynamics will show you how we do that. Because it's hard work to get it into a form plants can use. There's a lot of energy required. And so we don't want to lose it. And so when one of the biggest things for industrial composting is that you can smell it from miles away, because you can smell the ammonia. And that ammonia is nitrogen. You're losing nitrogen. That's life force energy you don't want to be losing. So that's why it's really important. A lot of people make compost, say, oh, you haven't made compost. I said, yeah, did you go and see it? Have you been going to look at it every day? Oh no, we made it a month ago. I haven't been back and looked at it at all. Won't that be good? No. It's a living organism. You need to be there every day, go and check it, in the first week especially. Is it heating up? Never heat it up. Is it overheating? Does it need watering? Is it going all wet and cold and slimy? Does it need more oxygen in there? This is your job as the manager. These guys will do the job, providing you set the scene. You set the building site up correctly, and they're happy. They've got a nice smoker room and good toilet facilities and everything else. Your workers will, and they feel looked after, they'll do a great job. Same with these. Then you get the macros coming afterwards. They can start it off as well. They're the physical guys. They're the ones who actually do. So I didn't say the chemical. How they work is that actually they produce organic acids. So they start to breaking down minerals. fungi, bacteria, and everything, the way they all have different ways of working, but they generally work chemically. In other words, they produce some form of chemical breakdown. They also rely on these physical decomposters, which are, things that most people will know about is worms. Worms are physical, they break it down. But anything else like beetles, millipedes, snails, mites, all these guys, they break down by physically chewing it up, breaking it down that way. Grind, bite, suck, tear, chew. So you can see down at the bottom here, there's a little, mites and things like that. The fungi and the bacteria. So these guys here, these are what's known as, what's the word here? What's the word of fungi that breaks down organic matter? It's the largest, probably the largest band of fungi. Their job is to recycle carbon. Saprophytic fungi. Their job is to break down organic matter. So whenever you see them, you go out in the forest, you'll see the most amazing array of them. Colours, textures, shapes. They're all doing jobs of breaking down organic matter, recycling it, and they do it through chemical decomposition. Mycorrhizal fungi are different in that they work in the soil. They're like the internet of the soil. They connect everything together.
They work on the networks of the roots.
Yeah, they work directly in a symbiotic relationship with plants. These guys generally don't. They work in a relationship with organic matter that's already died. And it's on the ground, it's in that log stage, and you can't eat the log. But you let these guys in, they'll break it down. That makes it more available, and then plants get the availability of that. The plants can consume the metabolites from these guys, and then you get ability to then eat your log through a plant. The food web of a compost pile, which is very similar in a way to the food web of the soil, you have different levels of guys that actually do the jobs. Now these all work in cooperation. There's no competition here at all. As you'll get to see, there is actually no competition in nature. That's a man-made theory or idea. These guys all know their jobs, what they do, and if you allow the right space for them to do the job, they do it very well. So, you've got it right at the top here, it gets a bit sort of, and it all starts here, the organic residues, and then it's broken down through different ways. Some of these guys, so earthworms and stuff, to me are, I would say that they could be in that first level, but I would think they're more towards the second and third levels as consumers. The real guys, you've got the first level consumers over here. These are the guys who are doing the physical. These ones here. So earthworms in that case will they'll pull down a leaf down their burrow, where they then digest. They'll work on that. They also to block their burrows up to prevent the water coming down. But that means then that's taken a leaf into an area where then microbes can start working on it. Bacteria, molds, Actinomyces. I think it's been called something else now. They keep changing what it is. But my understanding is Actinomyces is halfway between a bacteria and a fungi. They're the guys that when you walk through a forest, and if you drag your feet, you get that lovely earthy smell, that rich earthy smell. That's what you're smelling. They tend to operate after your compost has gone through its hot phase. They kind of 21 degrees is where they like to be. So they're coming in afterwards. That's what, when you go in and you go, oh, it still smells of manure, or it still's got that rotting smell, and then suddenly you come and go, oh, that smells like nice earth, when you know that the Actinomyces have started working on it and taking it to the final stage. Something that we've really started to learn in syntropics is, and especially with the visitors we've had from Brazil, is that there are many ways of doing it. You've got to work out what works for you.
Yeah.
If growing lots of vegetables in your early tree rows works for you because you can manage it, then that's great. But then we've got tree rows, there are no vegetables growing in that all.
Well, once you have all that biomass, it's a bit hard to manage vegetables with it.
Exactly. So again, it comes down to what you can manage. We can't manage that.
Yeah,
So we don't go there.
Yeah.
Whereas, yet, we're looking when we grow vegetables in the vegetable garden, we want to grow those syntropically, but on a 1 year placenta. Placenta 1, where it's just leaves you for 1 year. So everything in that, your emergence, your highs, your medians, your lows, to fit in the system, are all 1 year.
Yeah.
They're all, after 1 year, they're gone.
Yeah.
And you start again. That way we can manage it. We need all these guys. Okay? Something we need to really understand is that we, in nature, they are not specialists. You know, when I mean that these are specialists within themselves, but they don't work on their own. They work as a team. And this is where humans start to fail, is because we start to specialize and we become separated. And this is the scarcity thing. This is abundance. You put something out there and it starts to break down because there is an abundance of microorganisms, micros and macros. They will come in. You know, we have a dead animal in the paddock and we get the most amazing things come in. And I'm like, where did they come from? That message goes out into the cosmos. Boom, they come in. Great big beetles like this that are really good at getting right inside the carcass. And they're all breaking it down. You leave that carcass in no time at all, you come back and it's gone. There's just a mark where it was. That's recycling. So, again, that's another thing. They talk about it in urban, not putting meat or dairy into your worm farms or all of that. Yeah, okay, I can understand that because there can be a smell. But in a compost heap, we compost everything. If it was living, it can be composted, including us. So it's a way we can recycle. And recycling means firing up the nutrient cycle.
Have you read about the human composting place in the States that's opening?
Yeah, I have.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and there's also another one where they're making these pods. They look like a big pear.
The cheese?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you get put in one of those and that all disintegrates and breaks down. It's all bioavailable once it all breaks down, including you, and there's a tree growing on top of you.
Thank you, honey. Put me in one.
Instead of a cemetery with lawns that are immaculate and hundreds of white crosses, you've got a forest.
Syntropic cemeteries.
Syntropic cemetery. Again, just recycling. Again, looking at the different things. This is so you can. I like this one here. All these guys on a round table sharing food. They're all sharing. They all rely on each other to make the food available in one way or another. And no one goes hungry. Just to show you some of these mites, you can see it looks pretty big, but you can't see that with the naked eye. So there are a lot of these workers going on. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean that's not going on. So we start looking at the principles of composting. So the idea of this is so that you can, no matter what you have suddenly made available to you, you can look at it and you can work out, what do I need in order to get this to be created into what I want it to be? And how can I do that? So the first thing we look at, which is carbon and nitrogen ratios. This is the brown, so we try to make it so you've got the brown and the green. So when you look at it, you can start to look at different things now and go, oh, okay, I think that's more brown than green. Or that's really brown, no green. Or it's somewhere in the middle, or this is really green. And that way then you can start to look at it thinking, well, if it's brown, it's going to be carbon. If it's green, it's going to be nitrogen. And so with the compost heap that we're looking at somewhere in the region of, I tend to work on percentages, because then when you start to do the measuring, it's a lot easier. For instance, You'll see where people use wire cages, and they use the actual mesh as their gauges to, we need 3 meshes of brown and 1 of green, and that will give us our 75% brown, 25% green. This is an all-rounder compost, like I said. If you're going to be using it on fruit trees, or mainly just trees, then your percentage brown will be higher, because you want a more carbon-based compost, because it will be more fungal dominated. And we'll get to see that. And I remember in the syntropics how we looked at when a system evolves from a rock to a full growth forest, it goes from bacterial through to fungal. So that will again depend on what is your purpose of the compost.
Yeah, desired outcome.
So here you can see both grass, but this one here, this has now become just carbon. There is probably a little bit of nitrogen in there, but we call that brown. This one still has a very high percentage of nitrogen to it, and so this is what we call in green. Now if you're using a lot of legumes, very leafy greens, there could be even higher. And then also when we start looking at manures, again we look at the balance of the nitrogen in those as well. So the ideal ratio for an all-rounder you're looking at is 25 to 1 or 75 to 25%. We'll stick with the percentages, it's much easier. 25 to 1 people start to get a little bit like, oh, but so we'll keep it, we want to keep it as simple as possible so that you can actually make sure that you start to understand and get your balances right. When we look at the amounts of carbon to nitrogen within what we could be composting, we're looking from a very wide ratio up the top here to a very narrow ratio. And it means then it's to do the amount, in this case here, carbon to nitrogen. So if you're using sawdust, especially if it's hardwood sawdust, you might be looking at a ratio of 500 carbons to 1 nitrogen. Very carbon-based. Very good food. But could be very hard to digest for some of the smaller guys, some of the bacteria. Fungi love it, but if you want to get the bacteria working, which is normally what we get going first. So the ideal ratio is around about this area here. So, wilted greens, vegetable scraps, young grass, we're looking at this area here, which you want to end up with. So if you just use, let's say you make a compost heap just out of your lawn clippings, a lot of very high green, quite often you'll find it'll heat up very fast and you get a very strong smell of ammonia coming off it. You've got no brown there, no carbon to actually hold on to the ammonia, the nitrogen. So it is a real case of balancing everything. When you get down the bottom here, you see blood meal. The manures they've got there, that's an all-rounder again. The highest is pigeon manure. It's got like 6% nitrogen, and whereas you've got your chicken might be 3%, but then your cow manure is a bit lower than that. But then the all-rounder, which we've got today, is cow manure, because cow manure is also a highly bacterial. The biology that you find in cow manure is like all the biology you need for a healthy soil. Actually, a cow is a walking compost machine.
Yeah.
So again, looking at the principle again of the aerobic and anaerobic, the amount of oxygen we have in there. If it's an aerobic one, we need to have lots of oxygen through there. So if your compost heap becomes too compacted, like your soil, you're not going to get the oxygen in there, which is required by the microbes that you're looking for to do the breakdown. You'll end up getting the anaerobic guys coming in, and that can turn your compost sour.
That's what my current compost bin, it's just all food scraps. There's no carbon in there at all, so it doesn't really break down and it smells really bad.
Okay, and have you ever dug your hand into it?
No. Not doing that.
So that's sort of the way, isn't it? Straight away, there's no way I'm going to stick my hand. And then the smells that you get ammonia smell coming off it, but you also get the byproducts of anaerobic respiration, like alcohol, ethylene gas, methane. These are all byproducts of anaerobic respiration, which is not really what you want in this situation. When you've had a lot of rain and you walk out on the lawn and you get that, it smells a bit swampy,
Yeah, we get that.
well, you know that you've got an anaerobic process taking place. So what we're doing here is we actually want to work with microbes that are aerobic. When you look at the size of these guys, so the importance of having enough air in there, as I say, 25,000 end to end is an inch long. So if you have, quite often with compost heap, I've seen them where they're really solid and they just can't get going. And other ones that are really, really airy, they go really fast and then like burn out quick. And it's getting that balance between not too fluffy, but fluffy enough that you've got enough air in there to make sure these guys can do their job. Especially when it gets to the thermophilic stage, they need quite a bit of oxygen because they give off a lot of heat. So it's a bit like a fire. You need to have oxygen to get a fire going. If you have too much, so again you get too fluffy, it can go really fast and then burn out. Moisture, this is one of the ones I think where most people fail. They're just not aware of how much moisture is needed, not only at the beginning stages, but right through the process. The amount of compost heaps I've come across and they're dried out. And when it dries out, it comes to a grinding halt. And you end up then just with organic dust. And they're quite hard to get them going again. Quite often the best thing to do is to use that material into another compost heap. So the easiest way, very simple technique for working out the moisture, and this is the moisture of all the ingredients that go into it. Now the brown is the one that most people struggle with, because if it's wood chip, quite often it's really dry. Or if it's hay or straw, hay and straw are two different things. I'll go into a little bit more detail of that. You've actually got to get those ideally wet before you start composting. And the test is, you take a handful of whatever the material is, whether it be the wood chip or a dump mulch or straw or whatever it is, and when you hold it in your hand and you squeeze it quite firmly, you should start to get beads of moisture starting to come through your fingers. When you get that, then you know you've got about 50%. That's huge, isn't it? So that's what you're looking for. When you've got 50%, you know you're on to the good starting blocks. But that doesn't mean the job's done. Because when that gets really hot, it will start to give off moisture. And that's what I said, when in the wintertime when we open up a compost heap, we get a cloud of steam coming out of it. And that cloud of steam is moisture that's been given off by these microbes that are working hard, producing heat, and they're sweating like we do when we go out. We'll be all sweating today, we'll be giving off moisture. And we have to replenish ourselves with that moisture, or we come to a grinding halt. The same here. You've got to make sure. If you don't have enough, then in the case of less than 40%, everything slows down and will go dormant. If the process has already started and it's halfway through and you shut it down, it can be really hard to fire it up again. That's normally when you're going to open it right up and start again. If you go too much, you end up pushing out the air spaces, they become waterlogged, and the whole thing shuts down. That's when you can end up like your compost bin. You've got too much moisture there and not enough air. But also to do with the balance of your brown and green as well. So you can start to see there's a whole lot of things that we have to juggle in order to be able to create the outcome that we're looking for. But it's not that complicated. And the only way you'll learn is by having a go. You can buy your compost in. There are people who make compost. Individuals are making it on a large scale. You can buy it from there. My experience has been when you're buying someone else's compost, you don't really know what you're buying. They might have all the certificates to go with it, but at the end of the day, we had a friend in Tasmania who was bought in compost and wiped out a whole garlic crop. So it can be really expensive. I'm not saying you can't do it, you need to be really aware of what you're buying in. And generally when you buy it in, it's not to buy it in and use it straight away. Buy it in and let it to sit for a minimum of 6 weeks, so that if it wasn't fully composted, it has a chance to do that. And then just to test it yourself. And there are physical tests you can do. And one of them is using this. This is a very valuable tool that we have right in the middle of our face. It tells so much information when we learn to recognize different smells. So you can learn. And the only way you learn that is that you actually have to have the physical experience of smelling it yourself. I can't tell you what ammonia smells like. I can't tell you what ethylene gas smells like. You actually have to smell it yourself. And that's why you only learn by doing. In this case, so when you get to smell that, and today when we're doing it, every smell I get, I say, hey, smell this. You recognize that smell? No, I know, I've never smelled it before. That is a really good smell. That's your Actinomyces. Or this smell, oh, you don't want that. When you get to smell that, the moment you smell it, you go, I know that smell. That's not a good smell. I need to look at my compost heap. It's going anaerobic. It's become too wet. Too much rain. That's what maybe your challenge is. Ours is normally the opposite. It goes too dry. So hand test, really simple. Everything that we're looking at is keep it really simple. We can go into the in-depth of how it all works and all that level, but that's just too much. We want to just have to understand the basic principles so we can put them into action. In order for these guys to do their job, it's our job to make sure we keep the temperature in the zone that we want them to be. So it starts off low, it starts to build up to the temperature that we want to be, getting up to 68, 70 degrees. We want to hold it there for a certain period of time, and then we want it to tail off. That way then we know that we have done a good job of cooking anything in there that is undesirable.
Do you have to start turning it when it gets to that temperature?
Not necessarily. You keep an eye on it. If it starts to go above that temperature, then you start going, okay, is it in one spot? It might be just here. I go around the rest of the compost heap, and this is where a thermometer like this has got a metre-long probe. If you're serious about composting, it's worth getting one. They're not really expensive. They can mean the difference between a really good compost heap and a dud, because you've been able to monitor the temperature. And if you're going to go for certification, this is part of actually what you have to do. You have to monitor. When you've got a compost heap, you might find that your compost heap is good. You go around it, and you're testing all around, all good, 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 and then suddenly you hit a spot. It's a hot spot. And that hot spot might be due to that you've got a big lump of manure there, or you've got a dead chicken there, or whatever it is. But it might not mean going crazy and like, oh my God, I've got to turn it all in. No, it might not be. You might open that up and go, oh, that's what it is. And you can actually sort that out within that zone, not having to turn the whole heap. The reason why I prefer using static pile is because we don't want to expend a huge amount of energy creating energy. The idea is to create more energy than we actually use. That's syntropic. But it's also about compost too. So if you're transporting stuff from miles away, you think of all the energy to get it to you. You've got to factor that into what you're creating. We have to be consciously aware of what we're doing. So we need to source the material from as near as possible. But when we make a compost heap, we want to make it as simple as possible and use as little energy as possible in the actual process. If you've got a turning machine and you're going and you're turning it every day, which they do, what you end up with is organic dust. As an inoculant, it's fairly rubbish, because you haven't given the microbes a chance to actually develop, especially the fungi.
Yeah, fungi are destroyed very quickly.
And that's one of the biggest things that you'll find that's lacking in commercially made compost is fungi. They're highly bacterial. Now, highly bacterial is not what we want, unless you're growing grass. And they can handle that. But if you're growing vegetables, you're growing microgreens, you want something in the middle. You need to have fungal as well as bacterial. So it's really important that you understand that this process is the processes that are the principles, as it were. They're not that complicated, but you need to make sure that you work them. Same as the principles in syntropic.
Okay.
So depending on what you want to create is, and then the other thing with the hot composting is it can be fast. We're all in a hurry. You know, oh, I need it now because I'm going to be planting something. So once you start, you have a compost system on the go all the time. We have an area that is designated for compost, and that's all it is. And so it's always got compost on the go.
Are you always making one, like once a month?
There's always one on the go.
Yeah, but you start one before the first one. You start the second one before the first one.
3-bay system that you'll see.
Yeah.
So that way you've always got compost that's ready to go. But you might start specialising too. So for instance, for us, we have garlic as one of our crops. The garlic's requirements is different from, say, a wheat crop. Wheat, not weed. Wheat. And again, it's different from a tree crop. So you go, well, now this is an area that I use for making my high fungal one, which is for my trees. This is for my veggies, and this is my pasture. But you use compost on pastures too. And you can get rid of all the inorganic fertilizers if you use compost on your pastures, because you start relying on the microbes to do nutrient cycling, not you constantly bringing in the takeaway.
So if you wanted to make a fungal compost, you would use things like wood chip that are more fungal dominated?
Yeah, more higher carbon content.
Yeah.
So you're growing microgreens, which are at the other end. They're tend to be a little bit more. They want bacteria as well as fungal, because they need that for their nutrient cycling to make the food available for them. And microgreens like a higher nitrogen, but you want the nitrogen being brought in naturally.
Leafy greens, eh?
Leafy.
Yeah, just do leafy greens.
Yeah,
Leafy greens, microgreens,
It's the
same
same
thing, except
thing,
you're just
yeah.
doing it on a
Yeah.
bigger scale.
Yeah.
They require the same thing.
But that night.
You might say, I can only afford to do composting on a small scale because I don't have machinery to do the job. And so it's all done by hand, and I'm only me. And you say, well, okay. So what you're going to be looking at is, I'm not using compost as a means of fertilizing. I'm using it more as an inoculant to bring in the microbes, so that when I do drop my tree rows, there are plenty of microbes there to digest all that, recycle the nutrients. And so then when I plant my leafy greens, it's all happening. So again, it is coming down to, I like the idea of that we are actually creating more energy than we're using. That's very syntropic. But to me, in the composting system, you need to be looking at the same thing. You're creating more life, more energy than you are actually to make it. So, particle size in your veggie bin. So, you know, the difference being when you've got the smaller, you've increased the surface area. When you increase the surface area, you increase the surface area of the breakdown of microbes. When you've got a big lump of wood, the surface area is very small. But if you turn that wood into wood chip or shavings or sawdust, you've suddenly increased the surface area considerably, and therefore the rate at which microbes can break it down is increased. Likewise, when you put your veggie scraps into your bin, if you put them in whole, then they take longer to break down in your worm farm, and then you chop them up. The one thing that you have to be aware of is that when you increase the air within it, in other words, that's a lot more air in it, air in there, which is good, but there's a possibility that air can be squashed out of it easy. It's like a sponge. Piece of wood, I can give you a piece of wood now, so I'll say, here you go, squash the air out of this piece of wood, and you can jump up and down it, and you don't change the structure of it at all. But if I give you that piece of wood now in sawdust, and I say, now squash the air, you can jump out and you can compact that. So it's the double-edged sword, you're going to be aware of that. So if you make your material really, really small, like it's all the size of sawdust, you have got to be really aware that you've got to keep the oxygen in that.
Yeah.
Otherwise you'll end up anaerobic. So again, with your here, if you've got things that are really moist and you chop them really up small and you put them in there, they can really pack down and go anaerobic. So if you've got a lot of these fruits and vegetables not so bad. So for instance, this looks like a maybe the stem of something like a cabbage, or it could be a cucumber or something. That's got a lot more resistance than say banana skin. So that might hold it open, and so the air can still maintain. If you are in a system like this, you live in the city and you don't have access to a lot of sawdust or ground material, that's when bokashi is good. Because bokashi is an anaerobic fermentation process.
Adam, what does it look like when you upscale this on a farm level, like for utilising excess produce and things like that?
So I've had bananas, say for instance, there's got bananas in there. So if you're a banana farmer and you've got all these reject bananas, for whatever reason, again it's the same principle. You've got a very moist product. If you don't keep that open and aerated, and the best and easiest way to do that is by adding carbon into the system.
Yeah, that's why they put the outer trees with it.
Yeah, that way then you keep it open. If you don't, it will go anaerobic, and therefore you might look at it instead of saying, well, we know that we don't have carbon available in large quantities, but we have vast amounts of bananas that need to be composted. We might look at an anaerobic system rather, like a bokashi, but on a larger scale. And you're using different microorganisms to do the job. The anaerobes, lactobacillus and so forth.
Did you make this?
Yeah. So the shape of the heap, again, this is in when we're doing a hot composting. This is actually really important. In order for your compost to heat up, nice and smooth heat up, to hold the heat, and then for it to cool down. So you need to make it as user-friendly as possible. Because if you have to transport stuff from there to there, it takes time and energy. So our composting is right in the middle of the farm. So therefore, it's the shortest distance possible that I can get it to where I have it all in one area, because I have all the facilities there in one area. But ideally, you could end up composting, even your tree rows, when you chop and drop, is a form of composting. That's like composting. By putting all that material on the ground to break down is a form of composting. It's recycling nutrients. That's why we're doing this, so that you can inoculate that with as many microbes as possible, so that that will then recycle. If, as Neil was saying, that he thought he was onto a winner because he could get away with 6 years and never having to make compost heap again. If you make really good compost and you're not in an extractive system where you're not taking a lot out, you can actually, yes, the effect is a really good compost. I've seen it on a friend of mine's place. 6 years later, it's still working because the system is actually building itself. The organic matter is building, the microbes are replicating themselves, they keep recycling, and so it builds more. That's really syntropic. Life, clean life, clean life. But we know to take off. We need to feed ourselves, and then in the cases of business, so therefore you have an extractive process. And so your building compost becomes a little bit more often, as Neil found out, when you're doing that. So you build it into your system. I love making compost, so for me it's not a problem. I love that alchemy that takes place when you turn all these pieces that would be deemed as rubbish, trash, whatever, and you turn it into this rich, dark, crumbly chocolate cake that when you put it out, it has the most amazing effect on your soul and your plants. So they're the principles. Again, like we have been knowing these principles, That's the key. You know these principles, you can take them anywhere, and you can actually start composting with anything in all sorts of different ways. Understanding that these need both. Same as syntropic. If you know those 5 principles, you can take it anywhere. You go into a compost heap. That's pretty easy to know that one. So when you look at the materials that can go in, so the greens is nitrogenous material, lawn clippings, your weeds, leaves, hay. This is the difference between hay and straw. So what we've got on the back of the ute is an old bale of hay. So hay was basically forage that was harvested, and if it's been made really well, is when you break it open it should be still green inside. So all the nitrogen's still there. Whereas straw is a byproduct of wheat production. So the straw is what's left over. It's basically the carbon structure that's left behind. Once all that green, so if you take a wheat plant or a barley or any of those arable crops, all the energy, they're an annual, so they live for 1 year, well less than 1 year, but they're only on a 1 year cycle. All the energy that's been accumulated by that plant through its growing of harvesting sunlight, all the green goes into producing the grain. All that energy has gone. So when you come to harvest it, all that nitrogen that was in the plant as it was green has now all been turned into protein, which is now in the grain. And all that's left behind in the stalk is carbon. There's a few other things, but there's very little nitrogen left in there. So when you harvest that and use that, that is definitely brown material. If you have hay, brand new hay, especially if it's something like loosened hay or something like that, that is very green. Because if you wet that, it will heat up. It will get really hot. In fact, they catch fire. And that's what happens when people bale up their hay, whether it be lucerne or grass or whatever, and it's too green, it's too moist, it will catch fire.
So what do you want to use for the compost? Something carbon-based or something that's kind of in the middle there?
We want to use whatever you've got.
And both,
But it's
yeah?
just getting the ratios right.
But then this is the understanding, is being able to look at it and go, well, what was that? So we look at that hay on there when we break it open, and we go, well, this is actually broken down more than I thought, so it's actually gone towards, a lot of that nitrogen's already gone. But if it's still really green inside, you go, well, this is still green. And therefore we can't treat it as just as a brown. We've got to be aware of that. So that's factoring it in, so that you look at your ratios.
Oh yeah, I was talking about on top. You want to use
Again, we're going to use that.
on top.
The bit of the greenery in there is not going to, that's more of a thatch.
Yeah.
It's very airy, so it's unlikely that it will heat up. Hay is still classified as green, but it depends on how old it is. Kitchen scrap, sewage slides, these are all classified as greens. Now you notice that there's no manure there. We don't actually treat manure as a green. Manure comes in its own little section. And then the brown, of course, which is carboniferous, anything. So dried leaves, straw, dried weeds, again, when they're completely, the green's gone out of them. Wood chips, sawdust, paper cardboard. So you get the idea. So when you look at things, you go, okay, wow, I've got too much green. And this time of the year, that's what most of us, we've got a huge amount of green. So if you've only got green, I say I've only got green, I've got nothing else. Well, your compost made with green, it's something you've got to be onto it almost 3 times a day. Because you don't want it, and generally you end up with very little. Because there's no structure in it. The carbon is the structure, that's the structure of all living things, carbon. It's foundation of life. So you can't, again, but if I only got green, that's all I've got, okay. Well, then I wouldn't be doing compost heap the way we're doing. I'd be doing more of a sheet composting. I would chop and drop it and try and cover it with a little bit of brown that I've got. So that's a different way, but it's still a form of composting, recycling. Manure is, it can cause it to heat up, especially if it's cow manure and things like that. because it's got a lot of nitrogen. And direct lifted chicken manures, things like that can make it really heat up. Horse as well. Horse is what you use to make really hot compost with, because their digestive system is not as effective as a cow's. But manures are different in that they have life force energy in them already. And so we treat them differently in the biodynamic heap. We don't actually want them to be classified as green, because we need to make sure that we look after them in a different way. And you'll see that when we do the actual, I'll refer back to that when we do the actual compost. Wood ash is another great way of being able to get, if you know that you're looking for a lot of potassium. So you're growing the lower end of things like the grass and stuff like that, they like prefer more potassium in them. But also if you overdo the potassium, encourage weeds as well, because that's bringing back the primary, what's going on in my head, pioneer species. They can actually handle where there's a lot of potassium, whereas your higher evolved plants don't like a lot of potassium. We need potassium for fruit food and things like that, but it's not as much as people think. So we were talking about not using raw manures on growing your vegetables, for instance, because what's in them is in the wrong form, the nitrogen is in the wrong form. The other thing is that when they brought about the Green Revolution, they had a lot of nitrogen to get rid of. They had these munition factories that were making bombs and so forth. And they wanted to use these factories to keep it going. And so what they did, the nitrogen fertilizer now is being used, instead of making bombs, it's now making fertilizer for the farmers. Now, when you drive your system using nitrogen and potassium as the main drivers, is what the chemical industry is doing in the agricultural world, is driving the system using potassium and nitrogen. If you go and look at a natural system, it's driven by calcium and phosphorus. Calcium and phosphorus are not big money earners for a business. Whereas if you use nitrogen and potassium, they're expensive to produce. They use a lot of energy to make nitrogen fertilizer. But on top of that, if you use those to drive the system, you encourage weeds, disease and pests. Which means good money, because now they can come along and sell you chemicals. Oh, don't worry about that, we've got something to sort that out, and sort this out. But degrading the system the whole time. That is not actually how nature drives the system. Calcium and phosphorus. So the minerals I've brought today, there is no nitrogen fertilizer, there is no potassium. But the rock minerals we've got are loaded with calcium and phosphorus. So in your system here, you and the weeds that you have, like you told me about the weeds you have, and I know that most of the weeds that we all have, they all indicate lack of calcium and phosphorus. Not necessarily the actual mineral itself, but cycling within the system. Yeah. Seaweeds, dead animal, hessian, and you notice all these things, they're all things that were once living. You can put charcoal in there, we put biochar in our compost heaps. It's just another means of being able to hold the nutrients in there, being held in another form. We're going to be putting preps in the heap through water, compost, toilet waste, eggshell. Eggshells are really great calcium form. It's still in the living form. So if you're growing tomatoes, grind up eggshell and put it underneath them when you plant them, and you'll find that you get amazing tomatoes. Another way you can use your eggshells.
Does the microbiology in the biochar stay alive through the composting process?
Biochar's not even got
No, hang on. Char. Let's call it just char.
Yeah.
When you have char, which comes out of when you're making charcoal, so for instance, I have a large cone kiln for making charcoal. I'm being very careful to call it charcoal or char, because it's not biochar until it's been inoculated.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. You have to, then it becomes bio, life, char. You put life within it. And so how you inoculate that, whether you're using liquid inoculants or whether you're actually putting it through a compost process. So that's what we're doing. and putting it through the compost process, we're actually turning into biochar.
Okay.
Alright? So, putting it all together, again, will depend on, so this was at Microorganisms in Mariba. We had a big day. As you can see, we've got a lot of people, lots of hands-on. So here you can see on the brown layer they're using cardboard, so they can recycle cardboard through the system, or newspapers or anything. Just need to be aware of some of the coloured stuff that's used, whether it's an organic ink or a non-organic ink, whether those are going to be detrimental down the track. Generally we use cardboard, we take all the plastic off it, sellotape, duct tape, whatever's been used, the labels and so forth. And then they're putting on the minerals. So where you place your compost heap is really important. So the places that are really good to put it, if you've got a lot of sun, it's very hot, that's why it's really important to have your thatch over it. If you've got a lot of rain, it's really important to have that thatch over it. It's to maintain a nice stable environment within the compost heap. If you have it in an area where it can get waterlogged, not a great idea. If it's on the top of a hill where everything drains away from it, not generally a good idea. Somewhere where you can maintain it. But the most important placement of all is where it's going to be convenient for you to use it.
Okay.
That is number one in my book. The only trouble is most of the information is trees in Europe, the ones that are good and the ones that are not so good to have them growing next to, because they shoot in very quickly. Wow, we've got an amazing amount of lovely, nutritious stuff being right on our doorstep here, being created for us. And they'll put their roots out as fast as they can go, and they will help themselves. And I've seen compost heaps, people come back and when they open it up, there's nothing there except a mass of white feeder roots from the surrounding trees, which
Really?
thank you very much.
Does that happen with you guys?
I've had it. Making it a cold compost, which is what we call cowpack pit, and I put it on some eucalypts, and in no time, within less than a month, when I lifted up the actual manure, and it turned to fibre board, and underneath it was a mass of white feeder roots that were coming from the eucalypts, and they had sucked all the life energy out of that. So that was a good lesson. So for us now, where our compost heap is, there are no trees anywhere near it. Because they will hook in, they're not silly. You're in the middle of the forest, so that might mean that you have to move your compost heap around a bit and keep them guessing. But they guess very fast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They work on energy, so they'll quickly pick up there's a really strong energy field over here. Because the compost heap, once it gets going, especially a biodynamic one, when we add the preparations into it, a friend of mine who's very good at seeing energies can actually see them. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And she said when the compost heap was being made, it had a sort of a hum about it. But the moment we put the preps in, she said she just saw these lines of energy just pouring into it. And I'm like, wow. And others have seen other things when they lift it up and they see it glowing and all amazing things that go on. Most of us have not got the vision for that yet. We all have it, it's just being suppressed. And quite often by our environment and the food we eat. So again, why we make a compost heap? We want it live in the soil. The food we eat is nutrient dense, mineral rich, and biodynamically it's to take it even further to bring life force energies in, which will help us raise our consciousness.
What's in the biodynamic preps?
So if I just go back, so here we go. So the preparations we're using is the compost preparations. I've also bought some 500 as well, which is another one. So 502, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7. So these are called the compost preparations. They are actually individuals as well, they can be used for different things, but in this case we're using the yarrow blossom, which is, and this is where it's a bit strange. And again, if you can just work on the fact is that we're always about balancing energies. When you've got energies balanced, we have harmony. When you have energies out of balance, like we have on the world at the moment, we have disharmony. And anarchy is a result of disharmony. So the coronavirus is what it's doing is creating chaos. And the next thing from chaos becomes disharmony. And so we need to have that because that's going to create change. And so when we have these, we're actually using a plant energy and an animal energy because we need these two energies in balance. So these are actually, they're put into the bladder of a stag. Now, I can spend a long time on each one, but just to get the idea of balancing energies and different energies. So these all work differently, and the reason why they're working differently is because they're different organs within the organism that we're creating. That's why it's an organism. You're an organism because you have organs in order for you to function as the organism. The same with Mother Earth is an organism. We have to look at the forest of the lungs. We look at the water cycles, and these are all part of an organism. The same as you, the same as your compost that you're going to build. It becomes an organism. And that's why when Lisa saw it, she saw this energy pouring in. It's because that was the life force energies coming in to create this organism, to bring it alive. Now some people do go, oh, that's like bullshit. Okay, that's up to you. When you see compost that's been made really well, and you understand the process that's going to develop, and you hold that in your hand, you will start to realise the transmutation that's taking place. From all those materials to this rich, earth-smelling material, when you put it out, and I tell you, like a layer of dust, and how it changes things.
Yeah, I've actually, so when we built the farm last year, we put a thick layer of mulch on there, and over this summer, it's all broken down, and now it was totally overgrown, and I've just chopped it back, but now that mulch is beautiful now, it smells nice in it.
Yeah.
It looks good, it's really satisfying.
So this is why it takes a bit of time. So if you go in and turn your compost heap every day, you don't give nature a chance to actually do its job. It's the impatience of man. I want it to happen fast. Well, yes, the Dutch say we can make compost in a week. And I'm like, it's not compost. It's just organic material. And it'll very soon become organic dust and blow away. It's not actually what we're after. What we're trying to build is nutrition, but most of all, we're trying to brew up microbes. And those microbes have to have a chance to be able to develop, especially the fungi.
So obviously the time of year is dependent on how long it's going to take. How long does it take at your place?
To make a compost heap?
Yeah.
Well, that also depends on how big, how many people.
Yeah.
Is all the material ready to go?
Yeah.
The actual putting
until it's ready.
Till it's ready?
Yeah.
Again, varies. 3 months is what you want to look at, but then again, in the winter time it takes a bit longer. And if it's more of a fungal dominated, it might take 6 months to a year. Again, so this is where being prepared, this is what I prepared earlier. So you always have available to you, right when you need it, the material. That's the key. When you first start, you have nothing. So that's why people buy in, to get them going. And then you start, which means having a compost heap on the go all the time. Now, when you go through, there's a guy called Charles Downing in the UK who's done no-dig farming gardening for a very long time. What he does, he builds compost. He buys in compost, and he uses compost as a mulch. He doesn't dig it in. And whenever he prepares a bed, he'll put, like your lawn here, he'll spread compost on it. He will tarp it, and he's doing small areas. He's not doing acres and so forth. He's doing it on a market garden scale. He'll then tarp it for 2 months. Anything that grows through the grass will get killed off, and then he just plants straight into that. He doesn't dig it at all. These are systems that you could look into that might work for you. They might not. Again, it's looking at another way of being able to utilise these processes. And the way he does, he has nothing else but the plant growing there. So any weeds or anything that comes up, he pulls it up. All the dead leaves that come off it, he takes those away and he composts them. He doesn't leave them as mulch. And the reason being he does this, where he is in the UK, they have a huge problem with slugs. So you leave carbon on the ground, like mulch or leaves, it encourages slugs. So I don't know whether you have slugs an issue here. Again, so that's not going to be a problem. You'll find a technique that works for you. So these preparations are what are being through a process of making them, which is what we do on the farm. And then they're utilised in your compost or liquid compost. So for instance here, if you're making a liquid compost, you put in the preparations, it's the same as a composting process. It's a fermentation process. What we want in is smooth breakdown. We don't want it to be rapid and losing our volatiles, your nitrogen, your carbon. We want it nice and gentle. The same way when you digest your food. You eat your food, you don't want it all digested in 5 minutes and then suddenly you're hungry again. Or digest it in such a way that most of it you expel because you actually haven't been able to get anything out of it. We want a smooth, steady, calming digestive process. And then we get the result where we actually can be making sure everything within that process is turned into what we actually want. And we haven't got a whole lot of waste products coming out of a compost heap. The idea of a compost heap is to utilise waste and turn it into something good. But a lot of people turn waste into more waste by not actually getting the process right. So the static pile. So this is where I compost. So I use a front end loader. So this is actually a compost pile here. Now you can see I've let a lot of stuff grow on top of it. And the reason being is that this compost heap was where I was actually recycling a lot of animals. From the dairy farm where I was working, and the whole neighbourhood I became known as the dead cow man. Because people, when they lose an animal, what they want to do is they want to recycle it, but they don't want to do anything about it. So they just leave it in the paddock. And it becomes an issue then, because it can be a problem for bringing in feral dogs, fly increase, it could be a disease issue, whatever. So, yeah, but it's a very valuable resource. It wasn't until I explained to the guy I worked for, his son, who's now back on the farm, I said, look, I don't mind taking these cows. I mean, we're talking cows and calves. There would have been over 300 cows in that compost heap, and maybe 1,000 calves. It's one of the byproducts of dairy industry, I'm afraid. And I said, I don't mind taking these. I'm just extracting minerals from your property and putting them on mine. And he went, what? I said, yeah. You think about it. What is a cow made of? What are you made of? You're a bag of minerals. Your bones, phosphorus, calcium. Your blood, nitrogen. All your organs are made up of minerals. That is why it's so important for us to eat mineral-rich food, because we need to constantly be rebuilding ourselves.
So that compost pile and all the greenery, do you use that, or is that
Yeah.
just a way of recycling?
But that's been there for quite a long time. I let all that greenery go on top, because then I then turn that into it. So I'm allowing natural organic processes to break down, because it is very, very high in nitrogen. If I put that out as it was, if I was to then use that, like here, if I was to utilise that, put that on the paddock, I would create nothing but problems.
Yeah.
Because I'm putting out inorganic nitrogen.
But turning all that green into it is just creating more nitrogen, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's
It's
organic
being
nitrogen. All it is the nitrogen is in a different form. It's in a form. So the insects love the inorganic nitrogen. Inorganic nitrogen, when people say, oh, but that's chemical fertilizer. No. You get raw manure, it's got a lot of inorganic nitrogen in it. It only becomes organic nitrogen when a carbon attaches to it. And when a carbon attaches to it, it becomes a protein, an amino acid. An amino acid, when you feed that, it's like me saying, here you go, here is a handful of urea. Actually, urea is a form of organic nitrogen, but it's too concentrated. But if I gave you a handful of nitrates and said, that's what protein will be made into, but I'm going to give it to you and that's your meal, or I can give you a steak. Now if you're a vegetarian, okay, I'll give you a bean burger or something like that. So I'm giving you nitrogen in a different form that you can actually digest, and it's not going to make you sick. It's amazing. You give a very small handful of urea, nitrogen fertilizer, to a cow, she will scoff it up because it's nitrogen. And she knows that her microbes like nitrogen, that's why she eats a lot of grass. It's not just for the forage effect and the nutrition in it, but she also needs the greenery she needs for our digestion. The microbes in our gut will go absolutely berserk because you give them a huge amount of nitrogen not buffered with carbon, and it will kill it.
Yeah, she'll blow.
Bloat. So that's what I'm doing. I am helping that compost to become more user-friendly. And I'm allowing plants to do it. I'm not going in there and turning a lot on me. I let the plants do it. That now, 3 or 4 years later, that's beautiful. It was quite black to start with. It started to go anaerobic. Now it's chocolatey brown. I've allowed natural organic processes to actually break it down. And so, again, when you use your compost, I generally never try and put compost directly on the cash crop, the food crop, the one I'm going to extract and sell. I try to put it on a green manure crop that goes to feed that crop. So if I haven't got my composting done right, and it's still, I'm now allowing a natural process before it actually feeds the cash crop. So by the time it comes to feeding the cash crop, what it's done is actually now it's in the right form to produce a healthy crop.
That's super interesting. So you use the compost on your...
I've been composting a long time, and I'm not an expert. It's not to say, oh my God, I'm not an expert. No, I'm just utilising what I've learned is a really good fail-safe way of making sure I don't encourage pests and diseases into my cash crop. Cash crop is the one you're going to take out for cash. We grow a lot of green manure crops, whether they be the weeds themselves or actually planted. That's where you can then start to put on your compost or your fertilisers and allow them to turn that into a form that will be actually accepted within the organic system. You don't give the microbes a chance to actually do their job. You're allowing the bacteria to do a lot of work, and they'll do it very fast, but you're not allowing the guys that you really want to end up doing the job, which is the fungi.
Good.
No, and it's a lot of energy.
Yeah.
You know, you buy a turner. Everyone's like, we've got to get a turner. I was like, yeah, I'm going to get a turner. And then I started reading more about it. People who've done it, who are composter, you know, they do it as an industry in America. His name's just gone right out of my head. He makes 200,000 tonnes a year.
Of biodynamic compost.
No, his is not necessarily biodynamic. It's more, he's just a commercial compost maker. But he does static pile. But he does static pile. That's what we do because I don't use a lot of energy. I don't want to use a lot of energy. Especially, I know if I put front end loader, you've got a tractor, I don't have got a bucket on it. So that makes it easier, but still you're burning fuel all that.
Fuel and time.
All that. It makes it easier. Neil's happy that he's going to be getting a front end loader. But again, think about what you're doing every time you go in there. You're not only using a lot of fuel, but you're doing a lot of destruction. It's the same as when we go and cultivate the ground, we're destroying ecosystems. The ecosystems are working for us. But we as man in his arrogance thinks we know better. So again, you can see here, look at this coming out of it. I mean, yeah, that's what they have to do because that's the only way they can do it. But Malcolm Beck, there you go, his name's Malcolm Beck, what he does is he uses the turning machine in the first week maybe to get all the materials mixed together and to get it to be, you know, a nice mix, evenly mixed. When you get steam coming out, you're losing moisture, but you'll be losing carbon and you'll be losing nitrogen as well probably, every time you turn it. You don't really want to be doing it. So these windrow systems, these are more likely to be probably static pile. This is India. This is India as well. Where they do it on a very large scale. One farm we went to when I did a tour around India, back in 2000, they were Hare Krishnas, they'd been given the farm by the local farmers. And that gives you an idea of how poor it was because local farmers couldn't make a living off it. And it was just like gravel. It wasn't actually soil. When you dug in the gravel, it was just like gravel. There was no soil here. And what they did was, they did this. They built compost heaps. Everywhere they could. They went and harvested material from everywhere and they just started building compost heaps. That's all they did. And when that compost heap was ready, they just spread it out. Where it was, they spread it out and they built another compost heap. And they kept doing that. Within 4 years, it's the most productive farm in that area. By a long way. In 4 years. 80 people working on 120 acres. Differences. They got a lot of labour. But it's possibilities. So we look at some systems. This one to me, ever since I can remember as a kid, we always had a 3-base system. And the 3-base system is really good if you don't have a lot of material in one go. So I built one of these for my sister in Cairns. Even though she's not really got enough material, she's sort of starting to understand it. So the idea here is you start off in this bay here. This is all your materials going in again. This is where you need to still be aware of what you're putting in, whether it be green or brown. But this here is a mix of everything that goes in. You can then have a bucket here with all your minerals mixed into it, and you can add a bit of manure. You know, you can have a bucket with your dynamic lifter in it, and a bucket with your minerals in it, and maybe some seaweed. So you can add a bit of minerals, you can add a bit of dynamic lifter, and you water it a bit, and then it sort of, the wave it takes it down a bit, then you add a bit more, and it takes it down. And once that gets full, these boards here slide in and out. You keep adding the boards in, and once that's full, then what you do is these two are empty. You then you put all that into here, and at the same time you're churning the whole thing. Then you start filling this up again. When this is full to the top again, this one's now ready to go into this one. This one is ready, goes into this one, and this one, this is done. You can see the processes of going from there to there to there. This is now ready to use. Very simple system, and great for a backyard. You can have it, you can make them, these bays large. When we were in Africa, the bays were 4 meters wide. There were 3 of them. And we had, the cow manure was always collected out of the paddock every day and brought in, and then we added things into that, and then that would get turned into this one and turned to this. That was what the fertility of what we totally used on for growing. We had a veggie garden was probably about half, 3/4 an acre. We lived off that, and we fed all the people in our area off it. All similar sort of size. They're not, you know, like imagine this was a compost heap. You know, this bit in here, the distance from the edge means the travel of oxygen and moisture. It's not going to get here. This bit in the middle here can go completely anaerobic.
You're better for multiple small ones.
So when we make compost heaps, we generally look at the size. I say to people is, you want it 2 meters wide. 2 meters wide. That's your base. And when you finish, about 1.5 meters high, and that gives you your bread load. By the time that's broken down, that will probably be just under 1 meter high, depending on the materials you put in. If there's a lot of greenery in it, it'll be lower.
The last one we did now is that waste right.
Yeah. So the 3-base system is what I recommend to people doing on a small scale. And you've just got this constant amount coming in, but never a huge amount in one go. So you've got the bins, you know, the classic bin you can buy from. My experience with those is that they don't get really well looked after. It's convenience, it's just like a trash bin, just chuck the rubbish in. They don't get really looked after very well.
I've prepared one earlier.
And yeah, so is that on the dirt?
Yeah.
So we can lift that right off and have a look. Okay, so that's good. You'll get to see what happens with those systems when they're not really working very well. Wire bins are better, I think. You've got more air flow in there. You can also use the mesh, as I said, for being able to work out your layering of brown and green. Concrete blocks, more of a permanent system, not that bad. The wooden bins, this is what Maria Turner, you'll hear me mention her once or twice. She's a lady who I really admire. She's not with us anymore. But she spent her whole life dedicated to researching biodynamics, and she said growing using the phases of the moon. And she did it again and again for 70 years or thereabouts. She did open wood bin. And basically what she does is 4 posts in the ground, and then you just lay using those posts, and that holds it all. Very simple, and just using slats. She's just using pine slats. And that way then you can, again, this is not something you keep adding to as you go, because you don't have the material. I'm not a fan of these guys.
I don't like them.
I'm not a fan of them at all. People think they're great. All they're good at is making organic matter. The major problem with them is that they're not in contact with Mother Earth. And the same thing is if you build your compost on a concrete pad, no good. It might be very convenient, but there is a real reason why we put it on Mother Earth. It's not just because of the physical matter that comes out of the ground, like the microbes, it's the energetic. When you biodynamics, we look at, our way of being able to be connected into everything is actually through Mother Earth. Mother Earth is like a conduit of being able to harness these energies. That's why when you look at hydroponics, again to me hydroponics is nothing but good for garnish. It makes it look very pretty and you can make your things look for decoration, but to eat, they are garbage. There was an advert I just saw the other day because I was keen to get a backpack sprayer. They now make them that are battery operated, and the guy who was advertising it was for hydroponics. He put on this suit. He was like a spaceman, and he was going into these greenhouses and he was spraying lettuces. And he's very proud of himself, you know, in his spacesuit spraying. Well, it would have been very toxic because he was wearing a suit that to me would make sure, like, oh, okay, I don't want any of this getting on me because it'll kill me. But he's spraying it all on his food, on our food, his food. And to me, again, that's like, again, looking at outside of what's the natural processes. Hydroponics is not in contact with Mother Earth.
All the lettuces and stuff in the supermarket are hydroponic, aren't they?
A lot of them
A
are,
good
yeah.
percentage, yeah.
Yeah, and they're just. So we get the salad mix coming from the shop, which is all organic, and you taste the difference between that and one of those bags you can buy, which is very convenient. That's the thing; it's very convenient. You just pour it out and your salad's done. You don't have to wash it or anything. It's just whoosh.
Yeah.
But nutrition-wise, you get more out of the plastic bag, probably. And that's what people don't understand, but that's because it's convenient and they don't want to know. Same here, if you want to make really good compost, you will never make it in a tumbler. You're making organic matter, organic dust, and when you put it out, it will just be gone. Because what you really want is that life force energy, which is the microbes. You don't really get it in there because it's not connected with Mother Earth. Those guys who built those compost heaps on that Hare Krishna farm, they said they couldn't believe it, but the microbes came in. The worms, what they could see, all came in. You put them in one of these things, you won't get that coming in.
Yeah.
You'll get flies coming in, because
Yeah.
they can actually flutter up and get into that. And you'll get things like soldier flies, and you get soldier fly larvae, those great big flat, like they've got armour plating on them. Well, if you want to breed soldier flies, fantastic, and they make fantastic nutrition for your chooks and everything. Your chooks will go bonkers over them.
Yeah.
But that's not really what we're after. If you want to make soldier flies, then fantastic. You want to make compost. Composts are fantastic, especially for the leachate that comes out of them. The leachate does have microorganisms, but it's the nutrition that's coming out of those, which has been where your compost has been digested through a gut of a worm. And not only that, is that the worm's gut is an amazing thing. It has the ability to denature a lot of pathogens. And one of them I know, again, John Priestley, this friend of mine, was telling me that he gets asked a lot by the people who do roses. This is where, you know, and the issues that you have with roses, whether it's black spot, these fungal diseases that come into roses, so they have to be heavily sprayed all the time. And how can you actually deal with that in a system where you're doing it organically? You actually feed the infected plants, the leaves, to the worms. And they actually produce the cure.
It's like building up an immunity.
So that you then take the leachate out from there and you spread it on your roses, and suddenly you don't have an issue with black spot.
Actually, something.
You know, like Charles Dowden, he takes it all away, but his issue is slugs. And maybe he's got an issue around with the disease as well. to me, when I spoke to John Priestley again, going back to him, and I refer back to him, he's one of our biodynamic elders. He said all the fruit, that falls off of he grows citrus, mandarins. He said, a lot of people go, you've got to take all that fruit away. He said, no, that's nutrition, that's going to be actually feeding the system. It's not lying thick on the ground because he actually harvests most of his crop. There's very few on the ground. But the thing is, if you've got a system that's still in accumulation, in other words, there isn't abundance there, it's still degraded. If you've got a system like that, sure, what's going to happen is still you're not going to have enough life force energy in your soil to be able to actually pull that all in, digest it, and then feed it back to the plant in a form where actually it's nutrition. But on top of that, if you've got that life force energy in there, your plant is going to be healthier. Healthy soil, healthier plants, healthy people. The same as all of us. The people in this coronavirus who are getting sick are people whose immune systems have been compromised. If your immune system is right on, you can go into a place everyone's got the flu, and you walk out there and you never get the flu. Or anything. And that's because your immune system can deal with it. If it's compromised, the same in a plant. If the plant system is compromised, it will be prone to disease, pests for you to eat.
Yeah.
Nutritionally, it's poor. So what do we do in our modern agriculture? What we do is we actually go in and we cover up what the pest is doing. We remove the pest. And therefore we then create a life support system where we have to constantly feed that. This is an entropic system. We're having to pour in so much energy in just to keep it going. That's what modern agricultural, industrial agriculture is about.
Well, that's what I find so interesting about syntropics is when you have that diversity, and if a pest comes in, it generally targets one thing and leaves everything else alone, and so I'm happy just to write off that thing to keep the health of it.
Yeah. And the more healthy your system becomes, what happens is that when you have a sick plant, the same as a sick person, you vibrate at a different frequency. And that frequency is recognised by insects.
Yeah.
And so they're flying along and they see that, oh look, that one there needs eating because it's vibrating at a frequency that's suitable for us, which tells it that is actually an unhealthy plant.
Yeah.
And I've actually watched that happening in a paddock. I watched cabbage whites flying around.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do they know which ones to hit? And I watched this one, and you could almost see it going, that's it there. I sat and watched this for about an hour or 2 hours, watching this fascinating. I also just read Dr. Phil Callahan's book on tuning into nature. And that again is what we're trying to do is build a healthy system. We're using compost to recycle material. We're using microbes, and we're going to then put them in there so that they can actually start to build a system in a natural way. So straight away what we're doing is we're building a system to be healthy from the start, from the ground up. Then we have plants that are healthy. They don't have an issue with diseases and pests. When they do, it's just us somebody saying, okay, there's an imbalance here. Something's not right. I need to intervene here. Or leave it be and let it work itself out. Have we got the time for that? No, I've got orders next week. And then we start to be, you've got to be careful that you don't become you become the life force. You don't become the life support. Otherwise you will be working really hard and a lot of inputs, which you will never really recoup. So, wire cages, yeah, they're a great way for making, especially inoculants. If you're making inoculants, I know Lisa Price is using wire cages to make, she wants to make really fungal dominated compost to use as inoculant. And so she used wire cages because she can actually do it quite quickly. It's on a small scale. It's enough that it can heat up. You've got the mass there that will heat up. And it's very easy. You open it up, you can move it and then put it together again and turn it over. So that's another way you can do it. Barrel compost, this is actually another cold, this is what we call cow pat pit, is another way you can make a cow manure cold ferment. This is mainly used, and this is actually what we've got, we're going to be using to inoculate this compost seed with. We've got cow pat pit, which has got all the preparations in it. It's another way that we can actually get the biodynamic preparations out there. and on top of that a whole lot of microbes as well. Liquid compost, there's many ways you can make liquid compost, like your weed teas, seaweed teas, comfrey teas, road, you can use road dead animals. Another way, they're pretty potent, therefore have to be diluted down. They can be used as foliar feeds and so forth. There are many ways of using those as well. Methane digesters, not really going to go a great deal, but it's another way you can actually, through an anaerobic system, you can actually create energy. It's a composting process. And when I was talking about earlier, bokashi, which is really good for people who live in cities, another anaerobic form, anaerobic form. You get these kits. It's all been made really user-friendly. You get these kits where it shows you how to do everything and the product comes out of it. Again, can be utilised locally. Again, in America, this girl who's a member of the farmers market, she can take her product along there where it can be utilised again by somebody. It's just recycling, again, nutrients. So this is what we're going to be doing today, BD static pile compost. The difference is that we use this layering system, but we also use calcium hydroxide in the system, which is builder's lime. So what the basic is very simple. Just remember everything goes on the brown except calcium hydroxide, and that goes on the green. So everything goes on the brown layer, so that's your minerals, your manures, all of that goes onto the brown layer, and then on the green layer, all that goes on there is a light sprinkling of builder's lime, calcium hydroxide, and the reason why we use this is because the green is nitrogen. Nitrogen loves to live in the air. It wants to get back up into the air, and so it will volatilize very easily. And normally what you can smell is ammonia, NH4. So that's nitrogen trying to get back into the air. You don't want to lose the nitrogen. That's life force energy that you want to hold in the compost heap. By putting on this calcium hydroxide, what they call quicklime, which is what they used to use when they buried a body. And when I actually put a dead cow I let them rot for 2 or 3 days, so they've really got lots of microbes in them. But they stink. It doesn't bother me, but people just go, oh, I don't know how you can bear it, the smell, it's so bad. The moment I put hydrated lime on it, that smell just disappears.
Really?
But not only that is that holds all that energy within the digestive process really then take over.
Is that the same lime that you put in the garden, or is it different?
No, that's ag lime.
Okay.
Calcium carbonate. This is calcium hydroxide. It's been cooked. Builder's lime, what they make plaster out of.
Okay.
It's very cheap.